Welcome to the Susan Brender Show. It's all about you. Featuring shows on health and wellness, the performing arts, politics, and people who inspire you to be your very best. And now, here's Susan Brender.
I'm Susan Brender, and this is the Susan Brender Show. A while ago, we interviewed two very interesting guests. One was PRESLEY Acuna, and the other was KENDALL SMITH. Now, let me just tell you a little bit about them, and then we're going to just jump right into the book that they wrote, because this is a trending now book. So I want to welcome to my show PRESLEY Acuna and KENDALL SMITH.
Hi, Susan. Great
Hello,
to be
Susan.
here.
Good to have you guys. Now, let's just give them a little bit of information about you. You know, PRESLEY, you write very unconventional thrillers based in reality, but which take unexpected turns into the realms of fantasy, magical realism, science, and horror. And KENDALL, your foray into the writing world began with your self-published debut novel, Double-Edged Justice, in 2007. Your experience sharpened your perspective on the business and the craft itself. Now, that is what I think led you for the two of you to become sort of partners in this Trumpicana book. So let's start with you, PRESLEY. Now, why did you write Trumpicana?
There's several motivations, but primarily, watching the unusual tone and, unconventional candidates in this election, and the way the media has been handling, some fairly ludicrous occurrences, has inspired us to try and make a contribution to the electoral process by maybe highlighting some of these what are really unacceptable behaviors using satire, which is what Trumpicana is. It's a collection of satire, satirical stories that are about the potential Trump presidency and the Trump election process and its aftermath. So we felt that, with our skills as writers, we could make a statement that people could read, and maybe it would make them think about the outcomes if things are allowed to progress the way they're going.
Now, KENDALL, you're involved in the book as well, and as I said, it's real. The subject is trending now, big time. So tell us about your participation in writing Trumpicana and what you really wanted to get out to the audience, to the people who read your book.
Yeah, thanks for having us on again. Appreciate it. I think it's an interesting moment to revisit this in terms of our conversation and what we've discussed in the past. But, the thing that comes to mind is art imitates life and life imitates art. And when you look at the fact we published this novella, Trumpicana, in July, and you look at where the tone of the debates have gone, where the direction of the election has taken, it's pretty ironic, because not that we, I think, are, we're storytellers at heart, but to have something out there that speaks to the ludicrousy of the election cycle, it's kind of timely. And I've got to give props to my partner, or my author in crime, PRESLEY, for his story, where he projects what elections will look like 20 years from now, and how this election could really affect things moving forward. And when you look at having Donald Trump having the mistresses of Bill Clinton present at a national debate where 80 million people were watching, and you look at how the tone of how he's projecting the election will be rigged before the ballots even are counted, we're really living in a very odd time, and I hope we can almost go back in time. But PRESLEY penned that story that I think is it's part of two short stories. I wrote one, and then PRESLEY's story is the other, and it's the candor of this election has just gone off the rails. And I think part of it is the news outlets are to blame. It's basically 24/7 of the same conspiracies, the same subject matter, which is inappropriate behavior. And I think we hit a nerve. I really think we hit something that speaks to I think the disgust Americans have with our election cycle, and the fact that I think both parties need to put forward stronger candidates in the next election.
Mm-hmm.
It's really, if nothing else we've learned from this, is that we really need to elect the smartest and brightest to the most powerful positions of government.
Presley, what do you think is the reason that people are so they love Trump? I mean, there are a lot of middle-class, working-class people who love Trump. Now, what do you attribute to that? I mean, the man is making a fool of himself, and still, you see, if you drive around, you see all kinds of stickers and different things that say, vote for Trump. So,
yeah, you sure do.
All right, so why?
Well, Susan, I've actually had numerous debates with friends, colleagues about that question. And the most interesting answer, and I want to share it, that I got from one of my more thoughtful debate counterparties, was that it's easy to just say that those people are not intelligent, right, or underinformed. That's partly true. And just throw derision at the other side, just throw bricks over the fence. And that, both sides doing that just doesn't really lead to anything wholesome, right? It's just continued partisanship and divisiveness. But it's more important, the real thing to think about is what is behind that behavior. It's not just that they're uninformed or they're stupid. It's that there's anger, there's a motivation. And, maybe Trump is energizing that motivation by bringing other factors into the mix, like, xenophobia, racism, paranoia, other things that are, on people's minds, and you put them together and you create this cauldron. So he's pretty good at that, right? So, but I think at the root of it, there's just frustration and anger because a certain segment of society in our country has been relatively underrepresented in any economic advancement of the last 8 years, or any sort of well-being. Some people have just left behind, maybe because they're in legacy career. Coal miners can't get a job. People that are in careers that really don't have a future path or find themselves stuck. If you're a 50-year-old man and that's the only thing you know how to do, things like that, right? So, you have to kind of throw some empathy at it to try to understand it. But the other part of the answer is that people just aren't taught how their own government works. We don't teach civics in school anymore. We don't teach political science. So people just don't know. So they'll hear someone like Trump say, I'm just going to build a wall, or I'm just going to get rid of that law. But, he can't. If you read the Constitution, he can't by himself do any of that.
That's right.
It requires the entire government to work together. So those two things are my answer.
Presley, I'm glad you brought up the fact that they don't teach civics anymore and various other courses that would give people more information and education about how to vote and how to participate in the election. Let's go to Kendall on this. Kendall, when you were a kid, did you learn civics?
I did, and I was actually a huge fan of the political climate at the time in the late 80s, early 90s. I watched Meet the Press in my teen years and the McLaughlin Group, and loved the combativeness, and it inspired me to debate in college. And yeah, I think Presley has a very good point. Like, we need to take a step back and look at our educational system on some level and see and really prioritize what's most important. And I forget who said this, but someone said, the bigger issue of this election is looking at the education cycle and looking at how we need to fix things so that people like Donald Trump can't get nominated, on some level. I know there's a lot of anger and frustration out there, but at this point, if you're still backing the man after what has happened in terms of the revelations of sexism and his aggressiveness towards women, this man is unqualified for office. Yeah,
except that, Kendall, in our Congress and in our Senate, we've read a lot about all the senators and all the congressmen who are cheating on their wives and doing all kinds of horrible things. So, isn't it ironic that we have a man running for president and the people in the government are, are really doing things they ought not do. How did they get away with it?
Well, I think that once exposed, I think I know people, or I've read about senators, congressmen that have been run out of office, and I think that's not a bad situation or a bad result when the freedom of the press exposes those kinds of things. And it also brings up the question of, do we need term limits? Is it time to look at, who we have in office and, taking a fresh approach to the candidates, to the parties, and looking at who we are actually electing. I think it's a good point that, not everyone's going to be removed from their position of power, but we have the authority to do it because it's our government.
Right.
And people can be replaced, and I think this election is going to be, there's going to be a lot of that going on across the country.
Well, now you mentioned the word xenophobia, and I think that xenophobia is a hard word. I know what it means, and I'm sure you do, obviously. But would you define xenophobia for us and tell us why? When we live in a country that's supposed to be a democracy, and our grandparents came here and they wanted to get an education, and we accepted them, and we were all, this country started with people from all over the world, and it was great. Now there's xenophobia. So, Presley, first define xenophobia for us.
Sure, Susan. Essentially, it's the fear of anything that's perceived to be foreign or strange or other than your own familiar environment or group. The idea of the outsider, being something that you don't like, can't trust. Basically, xenophobia is kind of a paranoia about things that are different from your what you know.
Mm-hmm. And so, if you had a chance to talk to Trump, who obviously is xenophobic. I mean, he doesn't want Mexicans here. He wants to build a wall. He doesn't like Muslims. Islam is, horrible to him, and he wants to get rid of all these different kinds of people coming into the country. What would you say to Trump? And how would you, if say you were on his, just part of the Trump candidacy as one of his the people in his office, what would you say to him?
As a member of his team, you mean?
Yeah, exactly.
That's a good question. Well, let's see. I would point out that I'd probably get fired. I would point out that his name is actually Drumpf, and he's a German immigrant. He's a family of German immigrants. So, immigrants have made this country what it is. The Nobel Prize winners that are American winners are all immigrants. I think that's true, the most recent ones. The achievements of the smartest, the best and the brightest that want, if they want to come here and do whatever they're going to do in their careers, it only makes America stronger, and if we want to really be the leader of the world, then every bond we create, any immigrant family that succeeds in America and goes back home, and their family learns of the success and they send money back, and more Americanization happens, and there's an increased global awareness within that family now. That is all glue to make a better world. Mm-hmm. To be an isolationist country is in a world that is interconnected with us or without us, is to put us in a losing position. Maybe that's what I would say.
Yeah. And what about you, Kendall?
I have two words for Donald Trump. You're fired. I don't think my conversation would last more than 2 minutes before it got very vocal and very loud. Personally, just because everything he's been doing so far, trying to divide people by making race an issue, by denying sexism, all these, it is like, to use Presley's word, it's a cauldron that I'm looking forward to November 9th and hopefully put this all behind us. But
isn't it November 28th?
Oh, yeah, that's right, yeah. November 35th, according to Saturday Night Live.
Yeah.
I would have nothing to say to him. I mean, and the sad part is that, at one point in my life, I did support the Republican Party. And I think as my world and horizons expanded a bit and saw the world for what it was and matured as an adult going through college, I think you start being a little more inclusive, a little more open-minded. And New York especially. New York is the ultimate battleground in terms of testing your perceived perceptions of the world, and you get a more realistic view. But I just would have very little to say. Except I would love to actually debate Donald Trump personally. I'd love to take him off the stage.
So if you, okay, Kendall, that's great. So if you had a chance to interview Trump, what are some of the questions that you would ask him?
I think I would probably press him on situations in the global world, the leaders, and test his mettle in terms of his knowledge of global politics, of the leaders. I'd love to question him and see how familiar he is with Afghanistan, Pakistan leadership, actually try to ask him, pin him down for solutions of what he would actually do. What are his policies? And he doesn't provide a lot of direction. If you look at his website, it's limited. And I just don't think that he'd be able to really, if you put him in front of a Tim Russert back in the day who was on Meet the Press, I would think it would be far-fetched for us to find that to be a really revolutionary broadcast on television. I don't think he would be able to really dive into the subject matter. And you have to give credit to Hillary Clinton, whether you agree with her or not. She's buttoned up, and she has plans. She has got some strategies that are actually feasible, but at least she has a plan. And I would love to find out and really dig into the policies that would represent the Trump presidency.
Right. Yeah.
So no, I can't think of anything particular, but I would have a litany of questions that I think would expose some more truths.
Some more truths. All right. Now you just opened up a whole other situation. So this is directed to Presley. Presley, people say that if Mrs. Clinton gets elected, the Congress will just constantly change the laws, and she won't like it one bit, because if you have a Democratic person in the office and you have Republican Congress, it's very difficult to pass any laws. What do you say about that?
Yeah, that's really what it comes down to. No matter which candidate wins, it's a little bit alluding back to the comment I made about how a president cannot do things in isolation. You need the entire government to cooperate or negotiate or compromise with you to accomplish things. Bipartisan agreement on some level is a requirement in our government if you want to make any kind of new laws and make progress. So, she would have to, be a negotiator, be a compromiser. I think about LBJ, that was a Democrat who achieved the Civil Rights Act.
Right.
An amazing feat of arm twisting, horse trading, negotiation. What do you need in order for me to get what I need? Personality, charisma. She might not have all those exact qualities of somebody like LBJ. There might only ever be one of him, but a successful president has to be able to convince people of the other parties that there's a common cause and that, that you got to give a little to get a little. That's a little hard with the way the House of Representatives is set up right now. There's some very extreme members there that don't harbor any compromise. So my hope is that enough people will flip, enough seats will flip, especially in the Senate, not so much in the House, because the majorities are on the side of the Republicans are much larger in the House, and the gerrymandering is quite severe in the House. But the Senate has a fighting chance of actually flipping. So if she had the Senate, and there was a narrower majority in the House of Representatives, and she had some strong-arm tactics, and, she is tough as steel, she's tough as nails.
Oh, yeah.
And she knows her policies, she's not aloof. maybe Obama is, if you want to criticize him, has suffered from being a little bit aloof. Mm-hmm. Maybe if she was, more in the trenches, she might get more done.
Yeah. And do you feel the same way, Kendall?
Yeah, I think it's going to be an interesting election because this is Republicans themselves aren't even supporting Trump to their extent, so who knows what's going to happen. But I think there is a chance that the entire the Senate and the House could flip. There's a chance for that. So I think Democrats, they see blood in the water and they're going for it. Mm-hmm. So we'll see how it nets out. But I'm hoping in 2020, even in the representative or the midterm election in 2018, mm-hmm. We have some solid progress for our country. I mean, we often get lost in these debates and who's going to do what. But at the end of the day, let's hope that our economy is solid, that we are secure overseas, and that our new president will have common sense to bring people together, because things can turn around quickly in this country, and the tone and the tenor, they can improve. They have improved over time. Not entirely, but new presidents have a way of doing that. Mm-hmm. And things aren't as bad as they were in 2008 to 2009. So we have to appreciate kind of where we are right now, as tough as things can be for certain people, certain industries, mm-hmm. And healthcare is still a challenge. But we are not in the same situation where I can recall conversations speaking to people that worked on Wall Street where the lights almost went out at utility companies because they didn't have the liquidity, the cash,
right, to
keep the business going. And people forget that. Like, there were utility companies that were in a dire situation where they would have to shut down operations during the Great Recession. So we're no longer in that situation, thank God. But
right.
The country still needs to make progress, and hopefully in 2018 and 2020, we're looking at moving the country forward. And this election could do it for us. We'll see what happens.
Mm-hmm. Now, Presley, do you really think that's going to happen? Do you think we're going to have somebody who wants to run for president, who everybody will like, somebody who really will bring us to a situation where we don't have this Trump in the position where people are voting for someone who really doesn't know a lot about politics, but he loves his power, and he loves the fact his ego is kind of, oh, wow. What do you think? I mean, do you think it's going to be a man or a woman? Is it going to be somebody young? Is it going to be a lawyer? Who do you think is going to want to run for president? And just before we let you answer this, I kind of say sometimes whoever would want to be the president has got to be nuts. How do you respond to that?
As long as the cost of running for president is so prohibitive, partially because of laws like Citizens United, decisions like Citizens United, where you can have unlimited, funds being raised on your behalf and, money spent on advertising, and it's just throwing money at your candidacy. It's going to disqualify people that might fit the description of that you spoke of for an ideal candidate. Is it even possible for there to be a candidate that everyone would like when our country is so divided into partisan factions? It would require a pretty charismatic individual. And yet, if we did take the money out of the equation, there would be a lot more candidates that might be more representative of what people want. And there actually there might be more than two parties by the time the next election rolls around, because this rise of populism, which Donald Trump is inspiring and leading, could actually lead to the creation of a populist party, right? Mm-hmm. Populist nationalist party, which is apart from the white shoe original, minimal government, strong foreign policy, economic-oriented, traditional GOP, right?
Right.
So in a three-way contest, that's interesting, right? Who would win?
Yeah.
So I guess part of my answer is that, the way things are, you'll never get what you want. A major restructuring would be required.
Mm-hmm. And Kendall, We now live in a technological society where you can't hide anything. Everything's just out there, and people are getting on the computer and they're kind of listening to what is being said about the political people. Do you think that's going to influence the way we vote, the way we think? What's your thoughts about that?
I don't think that the lack of privacy is going to change what people vote or the way they perceive their neighbors, their world, their candidates. I actually think there's a great chance of a third party emerging, kind of to play on Presley's point of view, that this populist movement, people are upset, and you may see the Republican Party break apart. And I think also a lot of the privacy concerns, they're kind of behind the scenes. I mean, they're not. It's more of a red hot issue in Europe than it is here in the States. So it's a different perspective, and then maybe just general ignorance in terms of what people know about us. But the one thing that I think is going to be an ongoing theme is the exposure of candidates. You look at WikiLeaks and you look at even the Russian hacking, but you look at what we're going to see in terms of how governments operate, communicate. We've seen that the last couple of years, which has not helped the United States at all. There's going to be more of that, and that's where I think that could actually upturn a lot of elections and a lot of candidates in terms of their credibility. And I don't know if it's necessarily good, but perhaps something good will come from it. You know, maybe we can find more authentic and honest people to bring into government.
Well, but
that's the one area I think that it could really affect outcomes of elections.
Yeah, but I think that what Presley said is really what it's all about. Unfortunately, in order to win the presidency or various other political positions, you need a lot of money, and not only a lot of money, you need an ego that's up to the roof. Without that, they won't vote. I mean, they won't join the election. So, all right, we're at the end of the show. So, would each of you please give me your last word? What would you like to tell our audience?
Probably. I guess.
Please, sorry.
I'll just chime in. It's we wrote a book. It's called Trump Acuna. It's about what might happen if. It's about what might happen if a Trump presidency were to be achieved and some of the aftermath of that, but told as satirical stories. They're amusing, they're scary, they're fun to read. Really encourage people to go out and get the book. It's available on Amazon and Kindle, and you can go to our website at www.trumpacuna.com if you want to find out more about the book and the authors and how we put it together and the artist, etc.
Yeah, and to chime in, that's we would love to have people check out Trump Acuna, and we're authors under Percussion Publishing, and we have our own novels as well. So if satire is not your thing, you could check out The Day and the Hour, which Mr. Presley Acuna published last January, and I came out with a novel called Vault 2112, another thriller that is both up on Amazon. So check out our work. Hopefully you get a kick out of our Trump Acuna novella, and we welcome any and all feedback.
There you go. Well, my guests today have been Presley Acuna and Kendall Smith, and if you really want to enjoy books, they're one of the best authors around, and they've written this Trump Acuna book, which is just perfect for you to read now. So I want to encourage everybody to buy the book, and I'd like to thank Kendall Smith and Presley Acuna for being on the Susan Brender Show.
Our pleasure.
Thank you for listening to the Susan Brender Show. To be a guest, email sebrender@yahoo.com.